It begins like so many stories do, with a noise. Soft at first, barely noticeable. You're asleep, it's late, the house is quiet. Then you hear it, something breathing. Not your partner, not your dog, something else. You open your eyes, slowly, and at the foot of your bed, something is crouched in the dark. Pale skin, long limbs, no eyes. But somehow it sees you. You try to scream, but nothing comes out. It watches you, just watches, until it crawls away into the hallway and disappears. The next morning you're still trying to convince yourself it was just a dream, until you check your daughter's room. She's gone. From whispered legends to quiet horrors in the night, some stories travel by word of mouth, others by flickering screen lights. Tonight we follow one such tale, a pale, crouching thing, a creature that watches from the dark, one that haunted journals, dreams, and bedrooms. Where did it come from? How far back does it go? What is the Rake? Long before the internet gave us monsters, we told stories in candlelight. We wrote in the margins of old books, whispered in the dead of night, and sometimes those whispers found their way into history. A journal entry pulled from the tattered logbook of a mariner in 1691. The man, whose name is lost to time, was a ship's captain, crossing the Atlantic, bound for the New World. What he encountered during the voyage was never explained, but he wrote, "He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again at the request of the Rake." The entry ends there. No mention of storms, no mutiny, no black sails on the horizon. Just a Rake. No explanation of who or what it was. Nearly 2 centuries later, across the ocean, Spain, 1880, a nobleman, maybe a soldier, panted in his journal, "I've experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pursed me. His wet hands. I will not sleep." And again in 1964. This time it came in the form of a suicide note, discovered near Buffalo, New York. "As I prepare to take my life, I feel it necessary to assuage any guilt or pain I have introduced through this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him, for once I awoke and felt his presence, and once I awoke and saw his form. Once again I awoke and heard his voice, and looked into his eyes. I can't sleep without fear of what I might next awake to experience. I can't ever awake again. Goodbye." These accounts, collected from across centuries and continents, all speak of the same thing, a creature. Described in similar ways. Pale, grey skin, 6 feet tall when standing upright, but rarely seen that way. More often it crawls, low, slow, like it's stalking, like it's waiting. Its face, blank or nearly so. Sometimes eyeless, sometimes glowing orbs, black as pitch. A mouth, hinged, unnatural, with dull, blunt teeth, but always the hands, long fingers, sharp claws. The Rake, not named for a weapon, with what it leaves behind, raking gashes across the ground, across walls, across people, across lives. In 2003, reports started to flood in. Most came from upstate New York. Anonymous emails, handwritten letters, old photographs, even voice recordings. People told stories of waking in the night, seeing something crouch at the edge of the bed, feeling watched, feeling drained. Some reported missing children, others claimed madness. And then as quickly as it began, it stopped. According to some, the media took interest. Local news segments aired. Rumors spread. Then, nothing. Some say the evidence was cropped, others say it never existed at all. But by 2006, the stories resurfaced, dozens of them, personal journals, aforementioned shiplogs, suicide notes, even supposed references as far back as the 12th century, all describing the same thing, the same monster. A group of anonymous collectors began compiling the fragments. They posted their findings on message boards, image forums, fan wikis, and suddenly, the Rake was everywhere. A monster they claimed that had always been there, waiting, whispering. But here's the thing, as I'm sure you know, none of those documents were real. They were stories, planted, fabricated, not by a single author, but by dozens of users, working together. And the Rake? He didn't crawl out of the forest, not from beneath a child's bed. He crawled out of our screens. It happened in 2005, when a now lost thread on 4chan's infamous B-board, an anonymous, chaotic message board better known for shock humor than storytelling. The prompt was deceptively simple. Let's make a new monster. No script, no structure, just an open invitation. Users began to post fragments, uncanny ideas, bits of description, pieces of a nightmare. Pale figure, crawling, watching. Someone added claws, another one said it spoke, and someone gave it a name. The Rake. What followed wasn't a story, not in the traditional sense. It was something messier and far more organic. Dozens of users contributing anonymously, building a creature one sentence at a time. There was no single author, no copyright, only collective imagination. Over time, fragments from that original thread began to spread. People copied posts, pasted them into forums, expanded them. The original thread itself, gone, lost to what some call internet decay, the natural erosion of data in a world that never really forgets but rarely preserved. From those ashes, something solid emerged. Around 2006, a more structured version of the story began to circulate, what most people today recognize as the Rake. A short narrative, a family attacked. It was familiar, it was terrifying, and it stitched together those anonymous fragments into a coherent, chilling myth. The Rake belongs to an early wave of web horror, a time when stories weren't just being told online, they were invented there. It came before the Creepypasta explosion, before YouTube narrators gave the stories a voice, before horror AGs took over. The Rake was already waiting, crouched in the margins of image boards and fan forums. Back when we were only just starting to realize that the internet could do something ancient. It could tell stories around a campfire, even if the campfire now burns behind the screen. This is what makes the Rake so fascinating, not just as a monster, but as a piece of modern folklore. He was never the product of one mind. Instead, he was shaped to collaborative authorship, a decentralized, anonymous hive of storytelling. Fans added details, rewrote encounters, and fleshed out the lore. Just like oral myths from centuries past, passed from one storyteller to another, gaining and losing pieces with each retelling. None of it was real, and yet none of it felt fake. And in doing so, they blurred the line between fiction and legend. And the result? A creature that feels older than it is. A story that feels told, not written. A monster that crawled out of 4chan and into the cultural subconscious. We've named it, we've traced its history, or at least the illusion of one. But what exactly is the Rake? It lives as a liminal creature, a thing between categories. It isn't quite human and not quite a beast. The term liminality comes from anthropology. It refers to the space in between, the transitional, the undefined. The Rake crawls through those cracks, just like folklore creatures always have, where the rules of the world begin to bend. We don't know if it's intelligent, we don't know if it hunts or just observes. Its lack of motivation makes it more frightening. It might not even want anything, it might just be. Its form straddles categories. Humanoid but not human. expressive but without a face, predatory but with no pattern. It exists outside classification, and that unsettles us, because what we can't define, we can't fight. Stories of the Rake echo older legends. It may be new to the internet, but it carries old bones. You can hear its shape in the Wendigo, another pale gaunt predator from the far north. In Algonquian folklore, the Wendigo is born of winter, of famine, of desperation so deep it rots the soul. It is what you become when you eat human flesh, a monster made of hunger, thin as bone, eyes glowing with madness, lips pulled back from jagged teeth, a spirit of greed and cold. But the Wendigo represents starvation and cannibalism. The Rake feels like something subtler, not a predator driven by need, but an invasion, a breach. You can see it in the shadow people, described by sleep paralysis sufferers across cultures and centuries. Dark, human-shaped figures, silent, still, seen from the corner of your eye, while your body refuses to move. The experience is ancient. In medieval Europe, it was called a night hag. In Japan, kanashibari, the binding of the body by a ghost. In every version there's a presence, a sense of pressure, something wrong in the room. The Rake's power lies in what's missing, its purpose, its history, its rules. We don't know what it wants, we don't know where it comes from. And this is where the Rake joins the tradition of classic horror, not through gore or spectacle, but through existential unease. In the stories of H.P. Lovecraft, the most terrifying monsters aren't malicious, they are indifferent. Take the color out of space. A strange presence descends from the stars. It poisons the land, the animals, the people. It doesn't target anyone, it doesn't hate. It simply exists, operating on principles no human mind can understand. The horror lies in our powerlessness, in the idea that we are so small, the universe doesn't even notice we're screaming. And then there's The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. The governor sees apparitions, Peter Quint with Jessel, but no one else does. Are they real? Or is she unraveling? The terror doesn't come from the ghosts themselves, but from the not knowing. Are the children being haunted or manipulated? Are the ghosts external or internal? The question is never answered, and the reader is left suspended, uneasy. The Rake lives in that same space. It's a shape in the hallway when the lights are off. The movement in the corner of our eye that disappears the moment you turn to look. A thing without purpose, without mercy. Just a shape in the dark. It's easy to forget just how different the internet was in the early 2000s. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't curated, and certainly wasn't safe. It was a wild decentralized space, a patchwork of message boards, fan sites, and fringe forums, all held together with duct tape and HTML, and most of it anonymous. Places like 4chan, Something Awful, Newgrounds, these were the digital frontiers. They were chaotic, experimental, weird in the most creative way possible. There were no corporate content guidelines, no brand strategies, no engagement algorithms, just people posting, provoking, creating in real time. But beyond that medium, there's the message. Because the Rake didn't just emerge from the internet, it emerged from the world around it. The early 2000s were a decade marked by uncertainty and intrusion. The Twin Towers had fallen, security feeder became normal, airports turned into checkpoints, cities buzzed with sirens. We were told to stay alert, even in our own homes. And yet, the threats, when they came, were often visible, faceless, impossible to predict. That is what makes the Rake feel different. It doesn't wait outside in the dark, it doesn't knock. It doesn't ask to be let in, it's already there. It is born from that fear that it isn't something behind you in the woods. It isn't lurking in the alley, not scratching in the window, but inside, the walls, the hallway, the bedroom, where it was never supposed to be. At a time when fear was no longer confined to distant battlefields or shadowy alleys, the Rake gave a face to a growing modern dread, the collapse of boundaries between public threat and private life. It doesn't stalk in a traditional sense, it doesn't even seem to choose. It just appears, and when it doesn't act with rage, or hunger, or even cruelty. It acts without meaning. That's what made it feel so off its time, because by then horror no longer came with a face you could reason with. It wasn't Freddy or Jason, with a vendetta or a curse. It was Columbine, it was 9/11, it was the home invasion that made no sense. It was shaky footage of someone screaming in the background, with no source, no explanation. The Rake mirrors that unease. A violence so intimate and so empty, it breaks the brain trying to understand it. You didn't provoke it, you didn't deserve it, it just happens. And in the aftermath there's no villain to face. No catharsis, no moral, just absence, confusion, silence. I remember the first time I read it. I was 9 years old. It was the middle of summer and I couldn't sleep. It was too hot, too quiet. The kind of night where the air hums and your thoughts start wandering. Everyone else in the house was asleep, so I snuck out of bed, crept down the hallway barefoot to the living room and opened the family computer. The glow of the screen lit up the room like a flashlight under a blanket. I don't remember what I was searching for. Ghost stories maybe. Monsters. Aliens caught on tape. The kind of thing you go looking for when you're just old enough to want to be scared. Just old enough to believe that being afraid means you're discovering something important. Then I found it. Plain white screen. Black text. No picture. No video. Just a story. That was the moment I fell in love with Creepypasta, with internet horror, with stories that didn't explain themselves, stories that crawled under your skin and stayed there. The Rake isn't the most famous Creepypasta, it is by far not the most scary, or even the most well written. It doesn't have the meme appeal of Jeff the Killer, and certainly doesn't have the media empire of Slender Man. But it has something special. It was a foundational piece of the horror community on the internet, on how they interact, how they share, how they create. The Rake was built, slowly, collectively, like a ghost story told around a campfire that stretched from New York to Tokyo, to Sao Paulo and beyond, connected by strangers behind glowing screens and sleepless nights. And that's the point of the monster. The Rake doesn't last because of what it is. It lasts because of how it was made. It showed us what the internet could do when it came to horror. It proved that we didn't need publishers. We don't need studios or directors. We just need a prompt. Let's make a monster. And we did. Together. If you like this video, then why don't go ahead and like it. If you're interested in more, please subscribe and check out my channel. My name is Rez. Thank you, and good night.